Next up, we have Luxray. Anyone who's played the 4th generation games knows just how insanely cool Luxray looks and is essential to 99% of playthroughs alongside its best friend, Staraptor. It also had a brief but terrific role as the leader of a pack of Luxio in Ant Plains in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time and Darkness. As a whole, this light-bringing Lynx-Lion hybrid brims with feral, feline coolness. Today, we'll examine if Luxray was able to transfer these appealing traits into competitive success. So, how good was Luxray actually? And in this video, we'll be going over these competitive formats. It causes us near unbearable pain to say this, but Luxray wasn't good at all in its debut generation. Our theory is that it was the victim of some vindictive Game Freak employee who was jealous of its immense charm and thus decided to cripple it with some of the worst traits in competitive Pokemon. Meager speed, meager bulk, and a meager list of resistances that left it struggling for viability even in UU, as OU was far beyond its reach. Luxray couldn't even make full use of its amazing attack stat because, as Electivire proved in OU, being a physical attacking electric type was not a recipe for success. The choices for physical electric stab moves were dire, as Luxray's strongest option wasn't even Thunder Punch, it was Thunder Fang, so mixed sets were the most popular, to not only have a more powerful stab, but to be able to effectively hit physically bulky ground types with hidden power. Luxray had a solid 95 base special attack, and it got to use its huge attack stat to throw out excellent physical coverage in Superpower and Crunch, so this wasn't too much of a problem, but it still wouldn't be hitting to the full extent of its capability, as it would only be able to give a nature boost to one of its attacking stats and had to invest EVs in speed as well. Plus, it still had coverage issues. While Hidden Power Grass let it cleave through Rhyperior and Donphan, a lack of Ice Fang would leave it walled by Venusaur, Torterra, and Altaria, so it had to pick between two poisons that were often paired with each other. In theory, it could drop Crunch and run both, but it would then struggle against other common Pokemon, most notably Rotom and Miss Magius. While Luxray could sometimes give standard teams trouble, it was usually not worth using, at least if your interest was winning. Its issues were too substantial and made it difficult to achieve success with consistently. It thus dropped to NU, which was significantly more hospitable to it. The lower power level allowed Luxray to switch in more easily against common Pokemon like Skuntank, and it didn't experience nearly as many coverage issues, all while preying on the most common defensive Pokemon in the tier, Slowking. It wasn't a superstar or anything, and its issues were not entirely forgotten, but at least it found a place where it could genuinely be used. Gen 5 gave Luxray some excellent new tools. Wild Charge was a powerful physical electric move, usually worth its nasty recoil. It also got another excellent electric move in Volt Switch, allowing it to grab momentum for its team. Finally, the Dream World gave Luxray Guts, allowing it to use Flame or Toxic Orb and have its attack to rise to Choice Band levels without the restrictions of locking into one move at a time. But of course, Gen 5 is also famous for its immense power creep, and these new tools were nowhere near the sort of buffs Luxray would need to be considered even in UU. But once it had settled down in NU, again NU being a lower tier this time thanks to the addition of the new RU, it managed to find itself a more concrete niche. It was a physical attacker that was not at all fearful of the mighty Alomomola, while trashing the electric immune Golurk with Crunch and destroying Regirock and Golem with Superpower. While difficult to get on the field, especially since it no longer could soften physical blows with Intimidate, Luxray was immensely difficult to wall. With some spike support, it even threatened something as insanely bulky as Eviolite Tangela with a hard-hitting facade, which also pounded Seismitoad. It also shared a speed tier with NU Titans, Samurott, and Ludicolo, meaning it had plenty of opportunity to fire attacks off without having its speed preyed on. Luxray could also surprise with a mixed set. Hidden Power Grass was particularly nasty for luring and destroying Seismitoad, and Volt Switch could maintain momentum, though Luxray could trade it in for a Signal Beam that baited and absolutely crushed Tangela, while also smacking Duocean thinking it could abuse a lack of Crunch. Now, Luxray wasn't a world beater, as it still got outsped by common offensive Pokemon like Sawk and Charizard, and it did struggle to safely get into play. It didn't really define the NU tier at all. It was merely a part of it. However, it was a solid enough part of it that, if used correctly, could make the risky nature of its use worth it, as it was incredibly hard to wall for most teams, and the hole it would punch in the opposition's core would make it far easier for a teammate to clean up. Luxray felt the brutal negative effects of the abundance of new Pokemon, including Megas, brought in by Gen 6. It didn't receive any buffs, and since it was already a severely flawed Pokemon, this meant trouble. It would have more competition without a real differentiating factor to it, and more Pokemon it wouldn't be able to switch into easily, making it even more difficult to justify a team slot for. Even NU was beyond Luxray's reach by now, as it had to settle for the new lowest tier, PU. A choice band set was dangerous. If Luxray faced its hard wall Tangela, it could maintain momentum with Volt Switch, while most everything else was severely threatened by its attacks. Wild Charge smashed just about everything it hit neutrally, allowing it to cleave through much of the PU metagame, and Luxray had near perfect coverage for non-Tangela resist to it. Ice Fang destroyed Gabite and Roselia, and Superpower completely crushed Rotom Frost, one of the best Pokemon in the tier, as well as Chinchou, making its first non-Little Cup appearance. Chinchou aside, power wasn't Luxray's problem. As prominent as ever were the aforementioned issues of strong competition and Luxray's own well-known numerous hindrances stats, and typing-wise that interfered too significantly with its desire to blast everything. Offensive electric types are best when they are fast, and PU's other electrics like Rotom Frost, Raichu, and Zebstrika exemplified this perfectly. The latter two shared Luxray's typing, but they were vastly preferred because their speed made a world and a half of difference in terms of how much of the metagame they were effective against. This resulted in Luxray being used so little that it fell out of even the PU tier and had the lowest singles dishonor for a fully evolved Pokemon bestowed upon it, the so-called rank of untiered. Normally we hear about this happening to Pokemon in the 7th generation, where untiered came to greater prominence as it encompassed a higher portion of Pokemon. In Gen 6 it was still relatively small, only home to the likes of Pokemon you'd expect to wind up there, like Luxray's Gen 4 compatriots Bibarel and Kricketune. So at least Luxray got to hang out with its pals again, but at what cost? And if it was untiered even in Gen 6, there was no way Luxray would avoid the same fate in Generation 7, unless it got some serious buffs. Hey, Roserade got a +10 base defense boost in Gen 6, so surely Luxray could get something for itself, right? But no, Game Freak decided to let it flounder helplessly, even all the way down in PU. No new Z move would be able to help Luxray accomplish anything. Its frailty combined with low speed was just a terrible combination, almost impossible to overcome. Some players tried to make its old Flame Orb set work, and while it could do damage, it just didn't do enough to make itself stand out from superior physical attackers in Kangaskhan and Stoutland. Volt Switch was hardly a deal breaker. Other electric types weren't in short supply either. Electros dominated the tier, and Alolan Raichu was excellent as well. As such, Luxray found itself as an untiered Pokemon for the 2nd generation in a row, and there sadly isn't much more to say than that. And that's it. So how good was Luxray actually? To our colossal dismay, it wasn't good at all. It was decent at best in the NU of its first 2 generations, then found itself completely untiered even as early in Gen 6, with the same fate inevitably following it in Gen 8 if it's included in the DLC. If we ever find out who cursed the incredibly cool Luxray with such poor stat distribution that basically doesn't even give it a chance, we will send them a strongly worded email. The only way to make things right, I suppose, is that if they have Diamond and Pearl remix, they should grant King Luxray the buffs it so rightfully deserves, thus granting it a place as a top tier OU, with solid rolls and Ubers and VGC to boot. Then all will be forgiven. But make no mistake, Luxray never forgets. Also, there's no VGC usage for Luxray. Surprise, surprise. Thanks for watching, everyone. And as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And in the comments, I want to know, what do you think about competitive Luxray? You know what? Just give us your suggestions to improve it, because it could use literally all of it. And also, thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.